Good afternoon and welcome to the College of Continuing and Professional Studies webinar, Mindful Leadership Presence. Thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you all here this afternoon. My name is Shant Pillai and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. If you have future questions about this webinar or other programs we offer, the college's contact information will be on the last slide of this presentation. I'm delighted to introduce the topic for today's webinar, Mindful Leadership Presence. Are you aware of how you're showing up with direct reports, support staff, clients, and other stakeholders? Do you know how they perceive you? Most professional and managers will likely agree that leadership presence is a desirable trait in leaders, something you wish to possess. Leadership presence is indeed known to elevate your relationships within and outside your organization, and it increases your chances of delivering results and being successful. What does mindful leadership presence look like, and what are its components? Leadership presence is not a checklist, template, or one-size-fits-all. It's personal, it's influenced by your context and its journey. This webinar addresses proven and practical ways for you to strengthen your leadership presence. During this webinar, you will learn how to maximize strong first impressions and convey confidence in a mindful manner, how credibility, humility, and ego contribute to a strong mindful leadership presence, and lastly, how clear and confident communication supports a strong personal presence. It's a pleasure to introduce the presenter for today's webinar, Carolien Moors. Carolien applies psychology and business insights to challenges faced by leaders, teams, and individuals in a variety of industries and nonprofits. She has worked as an organization consultant, coach, speaker for companies in Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, and the United States for more than 30 years. Again, it's an honor to have you here, Carolien, and thank you so much for being with us and sharing your wisdom on this topic. I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Shanta. I appreciate the introduction and the partnership. So, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. A quote by the philosopher Aristotle that I believe to be true. So we will dive into some mindful reflection with you. The title, Mindful Leadership Presence. I don't know about you, dear listeners, but to me, they are three big, meaningful words. So what does it all mean? I want to preface that with the fact that I am speaking to you, obviously, autobiographically, in part, which means from a Western business lens, from a lens as the youngest of 4 children in a working class family in a mining town in the south of the Netherlands. So you and I bring our own context and our own beliefs to the table. In addition, you and I bring our expertise, our education, our values, our experiences. So are these holy truths, these definitions? No, yet they do represent what a lot of experts believe to be the case about mindfulness, about leadership, and about presence. So for those of you who are multitaskers, you might have already read a working definition of mindful. So mindful is being in the moment, here and now. So you're not in your previous meeting with your energy and your focus, and you're not thinking of the report you still may have to finish at the end of this presentation, but you're here right now with full focus and awareness, and in addition, with little judgment. And the second piece is that moment by moment awareness of your energy, your sentiments, your thoughts, bodily sensations. So being aware of yourself. So that is mindful. Now, leadership. What is leadership? There are so many books, articles, blog posts, workshops, courses, and definitions. My best one is leadership is helping others be successful and guiding others through times, developments, but especially hard times. That's when leadership is needed. as well as making hard decisions that impact others, sometimes in desirable ways, sometimes not so much. Do I think that everyone who is listening right now is in a leadership position? I don't know. I don't know you. Many of you might be. Many of you may inspire to be. Many of you may never want to be. And yet you're still in this webinar. And I applaud you for that, because you're making time during your probably busy schedule to reflect and to gain insights and to grow. So whether you are in a leadership position or not, whether you supervise or manage people, we all have presence, whether you want it or not, whether you realize it or not. And the question becomes, what kind of presence do you want to have? And do you want to show, regardless of where you are in your leadership development track? And it doesn't matter whether you work in government, education, the biomedical industry, the legal industry, healthcare. It doesn't matter, because presence is always there. And personal leadership is always there, whether it is a positional type of leadership or not. And so what is presence? It really is a circle, because it gets back to that mindful. Presence is how you and I present ourselves, our personality, how we carry ourselves into a room, and how you present your ideas. So it is owning the room, it is having an impact. We don't always own the room, but we always have an impact, right? And is it the desirable impact? So owning the room is literally a book, and you will see that at the end of this presentation in the resource list. I highly recommend reading this book as your summer reading, maybe. So it's commanding people's attention, and you do that by connecting with people. Virtually, that is different from in person. One-on-one, it's different than in larger groups. So there are so many facets that impact how you present yourself, how you connect, how you command, how you own a room. So that's why Shanta already introduced the topic. There is no golden formula, there is no one size fits all, but there is enough to work with here. So in case you weren't convinced yet, but I think you are, why does leadership presence matter, and especially mindful leadership presence? I would have had this slide on even before the world became more polarized and divided, and at times inconsiderate towards others, especially those who maybe look different, eat different, act different. But it's even more important now. So it elevates every relationship. If you're present in the moment, connecting with people, being mindfully leading a conversation or a meeting or a connection, that elevates that connection, that relationship. Obviously, in whatever position you find yourself in, whatever industry and organization, and in whatever culture or country, it strengthens your credibility, improves, increases, strengthens your influence. It fosters collaboration and partnerships by which you will likely deliver results more easily. And for you, it builds confidence internally if you show up with mindful leadership presence, because you're aware in the moment of what you're bringing and how you are presenting your values, your character. But also it builds confidence of others in you, which obviously leads to increased trust. So part one, strong first impressions and conveying confidence, yet in a mindful manner, maybe not what could turn into the cocky manner. So another book that I highly recommend is Fear Your Strengths. Not because I want you to be fearful, of course, but because our core qualities, our main strengths, if we overdo them, they can have unintended impacts. And that is why it says conveying confidence mindfully. So let's start with a mindful practice framework by Shapiro, Carlson, Aston, and Friedman. It's simple, which I hope you appreciate, and meaningful. It starts with attention. So attending fully in this moment, not being in the past, that phone call that you had to keep short because you wanted to be timely for this webinar, and not in the future thinking of that big presentation that you have tomorrow. And intention, what is it where you want to go? Either with a certain report, a certain meeting, a certain conversation, a project. So knowing why you are doing what you are doing, is it intentional? And especially in the moment, what is it that you in the moment wish to accomplish? Other than maybe convincing someone of your solution to an issue, maybe other than helping others through a difficult transition because two teams are merging. It's also about in the moment. What is it that you are doing and why are you doing it? Are you lecturing? Are you inspiring? Are you pushing or pulling? And for what reason? So intentionality helps your mindful leadership presence and helps you deliver results. And then the last one, attitude, probably doesn't need much explanation. It's how you pay attention to yourself and especially others and the dynamic with what kind of mindset. Is it a growth or a fixed mindset, which are concepts from Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck? Is it with a positive mindset or a more gloomy Eeyore mindset? And these are extremes, right? And your mindset is more complex than that. So what is the mindset that you entered this webinar with? So knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom, according to Aristotle, and that starts with in the moment awareness. So I'll let you read through these prompts, and I would like you to take one of these three that you answer for yourself. So the first one is on sensing, sentiments, bodily feelings, emotions. The second one is cognitive. So where are your thoughts? What are your current thoughts? Are they with this webinar? Maybe something we just discussed reminded you of a certain challenging conversation that you had or are still having, and you're maybe already applying what you're hearing to that conversation. Or maybe your mind is somewhere completely different. I am not judging, let alone condemning that, if that is the case right now, and neither should you. You simply have to decide, is that what I want? Or do I want to be present here now? So then you gently push aside some of the distracting thoughts that we all have. It's human. If we wouldn't have those, we likely would be robots. And so the third one, what am I focused on and aiming for right here and now? I think that is the only one that I can have an educated guess on. I think you're here to reflect, to gain some insights and tips, to learn, to grow, to develop. It's the only one that I think I can answer for most of you. The second piece of knowing yourself, in addition to awareness in the moment, really powerful, because if something isn't where you want it to be, you catch it and you can change it. We'll talk about that. A second piece is after the fact reflection. So you likely have worked on a project this morning. You might have been in a meeting, group meeting, personal conversation. Maybe you were approaching organizations because you're in transition and looking for a new position, a new organization. So after the fact reflection is about what went well, what didn't, why might it not have, and what am I learning and taking away from this? Because we always want to, I think, maybe move on wiser after every meeting or conversation. So I'll have you read through these questions. And the third one is really about you choosing trusted people who you think will be willing to participate and provide you with some feedback after you've been in a meeting together and they saw you act and interact, but also people who you think will be transparent and trusting and caring enough to not just give you the compliments, but also the observations of things that they wonder about or where they see room for improvement. So which 3 learnings can you take from your reflections and the feedback? That's always where you want to end up. So I would like to do a quick poll. I want to ask you, and this is in general, obviously, but how often do you think you are truly, deeply aware of how you show up, whether it's with colleagues or patients or clients, any stakeholder, how they perceive you? So we'd like you to answer. Is that all the time, often, sometimes, or never? So Grayson, let me know when the results are in. Look at that. A few of you, 4% of the 220 something people that are eager to participate and reflect and learn say all the time. I would love to be in that category. I am not. 40% of you say often, 52 say sometimes, and 4% say never. Interesting, 4% on both ends. So you know what you answered. It's not about comparing yourself. This is about realizing where you may have room to improve, but also realizing or asking yourself, did I answer this question correctly, if there even is a correct kind of answer? Because how would you know whether you're truly and deeply aware of how others perceive you? Do you ask them? Do you solicit feedback? Do they give you feedback? Do you observe them? Because by observing how others respond to us, we also get a sense of how they perceive us. But the best way to figure it out is to ask, in the hope that they will be honest and truthful with us, obviously. So when it comes to crafting first impressions, who was it? There was an author who said there are 2 things that are irretrievable. It's time and first impressions. And I apologize. Her first name is Carol. Her last name is not readily available in my working memory. But isn't that a beautiful one? And it's so true. So things that you already know, but it's not just about what you and I know. It's about, do we put it to good practice? And do we put it to good practice when it matters? So I don't think it needs any explanation why one word is repeated 3 times here, because preparation is really important. A couple of the things that I do before any type of engagement, whether it is a presentation live or as a webcast over Zoom, whether it is client meeting to client meeting, one-on-one or in groups, I take a couple of deep breaths, which is proven to be bringing more oxygen to all organs, including our brain. I repeat 4 words 3 times, even when I go from virtual meeting to virtual meeting, and I don't leave my spot. I say, I am here now. I repeat that 3 times. What that does for me and my brain, and for a whole lot of other people who practice these mindfulness, these mini mindfulness exercises, it tells our brain to really push aside whatever happened before and to not worry about the future. And then envisioning the room, the people, the surrounding area. And then it's decision time. And what kind of decision time? It's about you deciding how you want to look. Now, can I completely decide how I want to look? No, because I've been given all kinds of features at birth in my genes. So we're talking about, what do you think is appropriate for the audience and the occasion to wear? And obviously, which of those that I have available do I feel good in? Because that is obviously important. Decide where you want to look. Literally in the room. And if it's live, then hopefully there is immediate eye contact. Obviously, eye contact is a very business, Western, culturally specific way to portray presence. In some cultures, that would be extremely different. So please keep in mind that none of these are the golden formula. No one size fits all. In some cultures and in some groups and teams that I've worked with, eye contact had a very different role, just like handshakes and many of the other things that you and I sometimes maybe not take for granted, but appreciate as rules of the road. Well, they might not be in other cultures or subcultures. Decide what you will say, your opening line. Also, when you're having a conversation with your boss, an important one. Also, when you are the one leading the meeting or leading a certain agenda item on the meeting. What is it that could be an interesting attention grabber? Decide what you might ask your audience or your conversation partner or your team, and decide how you will use your voice and your gestures. And yes, that too partially is in our DNA. We have a certain pitch, tone, but what you emphasize, how fast you speak, the kind of pauses that you use, that's what you choose, as long and as soon as you're aware and mindful and willing to put in that practice. So crafting first impressions isn't very complicated, but you have to be here now and prepare and decide. And then you practice, practice, practice. And I don't think practice makes perfect, people, but I do believe it helps us improve. So, mindful confidence. I learned from a colleague quite a few years ago, having been in this business 32, 33 years. I think this was about 10 years ago, so not at the beginning, but I am not the center of the universe. Now you may think, oh gosh, was she so obsessed with herself? Does she have such a big ego? I don't think so, but I'll leave that to the people who know me really well. I never get that feedback. Yet mindful confidence, if I remind myself, and if you remind yourself, I'm not the center of the universe, even though I may be the manager here, maybe even though I am the subject matter expert here, which you may be, but still it's not necessarily about me. So for confidence not to go overboard and for you to fear your strength, confidence may already be a strength, you want to make it mindful confidence. If you're in the bucket of people who want to increase their confidence, we're also going to talk about that. But it's not bravado, it's not swagger, it's not bravery, which bravery can be wonderful, of course. It's a really natural expression. And by natural, I don't necessarily mean genetic predisposed or that you will have to be born with it, but it becomes a natural expression of your abilities, of your expertise, and the regard that you hold for you and for others, even those that you may not always gel well with, especially those. A certain level of regard. So a natural expression that can be learned, but only if you realize your powers, which is expertise, which is your learning mindset, etc. And to that point, Dharmesh Shah, who is the co-founder of HubSpot, wrote an article quite a few years ago, and he mentioned ways that truly confident people show up. And I shortened them, but he says they own their mistakes. Many times you and I might be inclined to self-defend and to rather not want to take ownership of mistakes, regardless of your industry. But I do realize if you're in the airplane building industry, if you're in the medical industry, and many others, biomed, but really any industry, do you want to make mistakes? Do you want to make costly mistakes? No, of course not. So this is not rooting for making mistakes, but mistakes happen because you and I are human, right? So we want to own them because that portrays confidence. Listen 10 times more than they speak. There are different formulas for this. This is what Dharmesh Shah said. Brooke Vukovic, who I will reference in just a little while. She talks about, I believe, 4 times more. The number doesn't matter, people. I think you get it. Listening more than you speak. And when you speak, at least half of it should be really good questions. Confident people duck the spotlight so it shines on others. Does that mean you always have to give credit away when it really belongs to you? No. But if you can take others with you in the spotlight, or if others really do deserve it and you didn't have anything to do with the success, then please know that that is one element of building confidence, according to Dharmesh Shah, and I happen to agree with him. They freely ask for help and admit to not knowing. I tell many of my leaders that I coach, my top executives, there are 3 things that a leader doesn't need to be. You don't always need to be the smartest in the room. You do have to have the smartest people in the room, but you don't have to be it. You don't always have to be right, but you have to get it right. And you don't always have to be somewhere else, even better. There is nowhere you should be but here, now, in the moment. So not knowing is okay. It's okay. If there is a lot of not knowing, and in areas that you were really hired for and that you thought or made clear that you were capable of, that is a different story, of course. Confident people seek approval of only those people who really matter. So seeking approval is a human need, nothing wrong with that. But do the people really matter? I don't want to make this too intentional or too transactional. But if you strive, whether you're a manager, a leader or not, if you strive for everyone to like you and to approve of what you do, you will be stretched in all kinds of directions and you will never fully accomplish that goal, obviously. I like number 6. You, confident listener, are not afraid to look silly and you can handle not being at your best. Again, if you're hardly ever at your best, we have something other to talk about and to work on. But again, we are human. At times we're not at our best. You want to be aware of that. You want to catch that. And for those to whom it matters, you may even want to let them know. So that is also part of owning this is not a mistake, but owning how you show up and what you have to give on this given day. Confident people compare themselves only with yesterday and tomorrow, so with themselves and their best selves, not with others. And they also don't badmouth others, obviously. And they take a stand not because they think they're always right, but they're not afraid to be wrong. And I may find that the most powerful one. I'd like you to choose 2, and maybe you already did, that you want to keep front of mind, that you really want to repeat to yourself, and you really want to believe. Part 2, dear learners, how credibility, humility, and ego contribute to a strong, mindful leadership presence. And I like this quote by C.S. Lewis. Humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's simply thinking of yourself less. So that's different. Because when you think of yourself, I still hope you highly regard yourself and that you're compassionate around and non-judgmental around your not so good days and the things where you still have a learning curve. So I love that definition of humility. So here is the person I referenced, the first framework, and many of them have connections and seem similar. I'm presenting several to you because one may speak to you more than the other. Feel free to combine them all or some of them into your own mindful leadership presence framework. It's about what works for you, where you are in your career, your industry, your circumstances, obviously. So Brooke says leadership presence is credibility plus ease divided by ego. And so divided by ego is, if ego is very high, you're eroding the equation, right? So it's often hard to answer the question, where is my ego? The best way to get a sense is to ask so you know how you're being perceived by people who interact with you regularly. Now, credibility is expertise plus preparedness plus integrity, she says, but I believe there is a second P, also presentation. How you present your expertise and your preparedness and your integrity. Ease, Brooke says, is emotional intelligence and agility. Well, emotional intelligence is all about self-awareness and self-management on the one hand, two parts of it, and social awareness of the other people in the room and relationship management. So awareness and management of self and of others and what happens between others and you. That is a whole topic for at least an hour. So this is where I will leave it. But it's also the agility, being able to make switches, to decide, is this helpful or harmful? Whether it's a thought, whether it's a sentiment, whether it is a focus that you have right now in that challenging, maybe performance conversation or challenging problem solving meeting with the team. Agility is about, how is this going for us? And is this where we want to go, where we want to be? Is this how I want to show up? And what kind of changes could I possibly make? So that's the situational adjustments, because mindful leadership presence is also about what you dial up and what you dial down in any given situation. And that's why not just your industry, your organization, your expertise, the field that you're in matters, but also the situation itself. And that's why there is no one size fits all. So that's the first framework. The second one is the PRESS framework by Halpern and Lubar, co-founders of the Ariel Group. They say it's more than skin deep, obviously. I mean, have you ever seen someone walk into a room and you were instantly drawn to the person? Because the way he walked, because the way she carried herself and looked at people, it's less tangible than we would like it to be, but you recognize it when you see it, right? And that's because it's more than skin deep. There is something about authenticity that comes with leadership presence. When you are building your leadership presence, is it immediately from a confident place? Is it immediately completely authentic? Maybe not. And that's okay, because it is that journey. So here as well, no surprise, the P for present, being present in the here and now with the people and the topic and the context, reaching out to people, which is similar to listening and asking much more than you speak and argue or explain. It's about the expressiveness of your emotions. Some of us are much more expressive than others. So we don't all have to become the most animated person, because that may not even look like you. But becoming aware of whether you even use your hands, what you do with your eyes, what you do with your voice, all of that matters. So have you ever taped yourself? Have you ever heard yourself back on a recording? And a lot of people will say, oh yeah, I don't like that. Well, most of us feel that way because we never hear ourselves like everyone else always hears us. We hear more of ourselves with our head and immediate surroundings as a sounding board rather than the whole room. And then self-knowing. Again, Aristotle, That includes accepting yourself and representing your values. So accepting yourself may sound like it could be in conflict with growing and learning, which it is not. It's accepting yourself in this very moment. And if you like it and it seems helpful, keep doing what you're doing. Keep presenting yourself and your ideas the way you are doing. And if accepting yourself and being aware of how you're showing up right now is not exactly how you want it, you have a choice of making one or two small changes. Maybe by shifting from listening to asking, or from talking to asking, from being really detailed to becoming more helicopter speaker, maybe slowing down the talking, maybe speeding up the talking, maybe putting a smile on your face. So press for present, reaching out, expressiveness, and self-knowing. The authors of Own the Room that I already showed you talk about the ACE framework. And this is rooted, I'm not sure whether they talk about that in their book, but this is rooted in cognitive psychology, which focuses on the assumptions and beliefs that we hold in general, but we can change them, about groups of people, about types of situations, about countries, subcultures, ourselves, about certain types of challenges. So what you believe, what you think, informs what you see, what you observe, what you're looking for, what you're focused on, what you're even hunting for. Ever heard of confirmation bias? Seeking evidence of what you already believe to be true. Now that makes sense, but it also is not very smart because you already believe what you believe. So maybe it's smarter to go and seek evidence of other perspectives or of other approaches or other truths. So what you believe and your assumptions, they guide what you look for, how you interpret, and therefore how you act and react. And that in turn influences how others experience you. So whenever you're not influencing the way you intended to, you're not getting from the one-on-one meeting or group meeting what you thought you were going to get, whether it is an interaction or the quality or the nature of the interactions, ask yourself, might some of my assumptions and beliefs about the meeting, the topics, the person or the people or myself be derailing me, be unintentionally incentivizing the dynamic and the atmosphere that I didn't want to create? Could my assumptions play a role? And then which of these assumptions could I gently push aside and replace it with a slightly or more than slightly different one? Communication skills, obviously, what you say, how you say it, when you say it, with which force, speed, tone, voice. And then the energy. What is your physical presence? Are you generally aware of the physical presence you bring into a room? And some of us appear more energetic than others. Some of us may be more extroverted and others more introverted, and the more extroverted people may recognize that they much quicker start chatting with people in the virtual room, or shake hands or do high fives or wave and make connections in person. Not always necessarily. Introverts know how to do that as well. Unfortunately, this is much more a world catered to extroverts and more appreciating extroverts, which I think is a truly sad situation because we're not benefiting from the diversity of styles, thoughts, ways of processing things. And I also think it's not very welcoming. I think it's very self-oriented. So energy, physical presence, body, voice, mannerisms. How often have you lately started a really important couple of first lines of a conversation or a meeting in front of your mirror at home, or maybe even in your business building or manufacturing facility, and just looked at how you are using your body and your mannerisms? Maybe you haven't done that in a long time. Maybe you do it almost always. A fourth framework and expert, Annette Kramer, 10 principles for leadership presence. And I said Kramer because I pronounced it the Dutch way. It's originally a Dutch name, but you would likely say Kramer. So I will have you read through these 7 elements, and I will speak about 2. And I also want you to choose 2 that you keep front of mind as soon as you log off from this webinar to practice for the remainder of the day. So I hope you were able to identify 1 or 2. And number 5, I really like number 5. Lead with what you care about and hopefully what others care about. And not just hopefully, that's essential if you want to influence people, if you want to help your team or a colleague or a patient through a difficult transition or decision. It's speaking about what your listeners, what this person cares about. And that really gives you presence and influence. And then number 7, focusing through your body. We find that breathing. How often are you aware intense moments, however brief or small they may be, or really important moments, they might not even be tense, but whether your breathing is slow and deep or quick and shallow. So 3 deep breaths before any kind of, call it stage performance, is extremely helpful, as I mentioned in the beginning. So we have a second poll question for you. What mindful leadership is not. It's not taking up undue space, drawing attention to self, using domineering language, listening well yet advocating poorly, pretending to have all the answers, advocating strongly yet failing to listen, and using apologetic or differential language. So the question is, how many of these 7 behaviors have you been guilty of in the past month? None at all? 1 or 2, 3 or 4, all 7. So have an educated guess, of course. And I assume you're going to be honest with yourself. And I appreciate you reflecting on these candidly. All these are human tendencies, human pitfalls. So I'm curious to learn what the results are of this brief self-reflection. None at all, 2%. All 7, 8%. See, usually the extremes are really small in numbers. And then 44 and 46%, a tie almost, 1 or 2, and 3 to 4. Well, they're people that makes you very human. These are normal tendencies. And it's up to you and I to decide in which situations they're really not helping us. Might there be a circumstance, a situation in which any of these could be helpful? Yes, absolutely. There's always exceptions, always circumstances. For example, taking up undue space. Well, the word undue doesn't sound very nice, but we all know there are times where we need to do the opposite of what we maybe want to do or what we value. There could be reasons for that. In general, these are not elements of mindful leadership. So what not to do? Just to make good use of the power of repetition a little bit, but there's also something new in here. The fidgeting, the rambling with details and repetition, filler words, which is actually or kinda, slouching when standing, sitting, or moving, and avoiding upspeak ending a sentence as if it were a question. So, things to avoid. And is this always true? I generally shy away from these lists, what not to do, because it seems prescriptive. And obviously, if you do any of these and you do a whole lot of the other things that, according to experts and myself, portray strong and mindful leadership presence, then maybe you do fidget. Maybe that is the one thing that you do, and you will still own the room and people will still remember you. So it's the total package, of course, that matters. If you recognize quite a few of these and not all the things that we already discussed to do, then that might be reason to practice even more and to revisit the webinar or to look at the Institute for Mindful Leadership. They have a website. Now, on the topic of men and women, if this were a live audience, I would ask you to raise your hand. How many people have thought, I wonder whether she's going to address differences between women and men? Am I the expert on that? No. Do I think there is a huge, beautiful diversity and variety within the group called women and within the group called man? Yes, absolutely. And many studies and many maybe of your own experiences as women or as men who have seen women, you may experience facing the need to be warm, plus nice and competent, and tough all at the same time. It depends on your company culture, your boss, your team, maybe the level where you're at. It depends on what culture, literally, and what country you are dialing in from, or maybe doing business with, or have lived, or maybe moving to. There are cultural differences between my home country, the Netherlands, and my partial home country, Germany, and the beautiful country we live in now, the United States of America, Florida, and later Minnesota, or Singapore, where my husband and I spent quite a bit of time. There are so many cultural differences. Yet, these authors talk about 4 balancing acts for women: demanding yet caring, authoritative, not easy for a Dutch person, yet participative, advocating for self yet serving others, and maintaining distance yet being approachable. So there is another good book called The 8 Paradoxes of Leadership. It's not about women or men, it's about leadership. And I see this similarly. These are paradoxes or polarities that you want to manage. And so tips for women, yes, and for men, of course. And I will have you read through these 5. And I would like you to choose one. And of course, getting rid of the I'm sorry, only if there is no need to apologize, because I truly believe in the power of owning something and apologizing authentically and amending. But this is a different context, of course. Eliminating doubt, not condensing your body, and being visible. So I hope you chose one. So part 3, clear and confident communication, which supports a strong personal presence. There we go. The repetition is always a good one. Remember humility? It's thinking of yourself less. That's all it is. 7 myths. One myth is, I am who I am. Well, it's not a myth. It's true. But who you are now and how you are now doesn't have to be who you are and how you are tomorrow, next month, next year. That's what's called learning, living, life, experiences. But we only learn from life and experiences, whether they be personal or professional, if we want to see the learnings, if we really want to mine the wisdom and move on wiser. Another one, I'm too old to change. No one is ever too old to change. Some things may be harder to change. It's all about where you put your energy, your focus, and how much you're willing to invest. I can fake it till I make it. There is a whole lot to do, or was about that, with Amy Cuddy. If you want to look her up, great speaker, great researcher, and also made some mistakes in how she presented the results of her experiments and her studies. But I don't think we should try and fake it. Is it okay to not be completely showing the nerves that you feel, to not be completely sharing all the doubts that you have? Yes, of course. But pure faking is in absolute opposition with and clashes with authenticity, which is a really important element of your leadership presence. Executive presence is exclusive to certain people only, and they were born with it. No, not true. Otherwise, you wouldn't have signed up for this webinar. I'm successful. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, yeah, if you're successful, perfect. Yet, I would like to think that we all learn until our very last breath. I need a certain degree of career success first. Maybe you should turn it around, right? And all leaders with presence are born great speakers. No, they are not. I know leaders with great presence who are not great speakers, but they have presence in other situations. So when it comes to communication, and this could be a whole separate hour, of course, I share with my teams and my executives that I coach and that I guide through changes and through team development sessions with the 8 C's of communication success. You want to be clear, so not leaving anything ambiguous. You want to be concise. You want to communicate something consistently, so you don't want to have any contradictions in your own either presentation or in your own content. You want to be candid to a certain extent in a way that it serves the relationship and the people that you are managing, presenting for, working with. You want to be client, stakeholder, patient, customer focused. Remember, that was part of one of Annette Kramer's elements. Caring, compassionate, non-judgmental. Remember, part of mindfulness. Calm, and we cannot always be calm in every circumstance, especially when certain people may be pressing your hot buttons. Someone may be in your interpersonal allergy zone. So you may have a food allergy and or a seasonal allergy, but all of us have interpersonal allergies. So we may not always feel calm, but we can always calm ourselves down, because that creates, again, that leadership presence by drinking some water, by doing some deep breaths, and by maybe taking a pause in your mind or literally, and obviously being collaborative, looking for win-win situations. So mindful communication, I think it's delivering thoughtful, effective messages. Effective is in the eye of the recipient, and responding to people in a thoughtful manner, especially when they bring things to the table in a way that you find not so conducive, or with a content or a focus that you do not agree with, or in a style that you do not appreciate, especially then in those cases. It's up to us to do the hard work, to still be respectful, to be truly listening, to be asking questions, and to be thoughtful. So it's about setting an intention, being fully present here and now, which is kind of closing the circle, remaining open and not non-judgmental, and relating to others with that grace and compassion. So it's really about bringing a stronger, deeper level of awareness to your listening and to your speaking. So it's everything that we talked about around mindfulness, but especially focused on the non-judgmental and on 2 leadership superpowers. One is listening. So are you truly listening in that chaotic team meeting, or are you waiting to speak or prove something, defend yourself, position yourself, etc.? And are you trying to be right or working to get it right? Again, it's a big topic, but remember, leadership superpower number 1 is listening. Number 2 is curiosity, not the nosy kind, but being truly interested in the person, their thought processes, their needs, their underlying interests, and sensing the limits of your knowledge and exploring what you don't know or what perspective you may not have taken. and asking really meaningful questions of other people to learn more, but also to help that person think differently, deeper, with more variety. So, two of your leadership superpowers, whether you're already a leader or not. And then, almost in closing, I would like to share John Kabat-Zinn's attitudes to practice mindful communication with you. He is the co-founder of a mindful medicine institute. He is amongst many other things, a doctor. So very similar things, non-judging, so observing without categorizing or evaluating. Will we ever be able to do that 100%? No, but you can dial the categorizing and the evaluating down. Like to judgment, number 2, acceptance means seeing things as if they are without judgment. We can dial it down. Patience, accepting the fact that things happen in their own time. And a beginner's mind, I really like that one. See things as if it was for the first time. See that person in your department or in that other department or on your team as if you see them for the very first time. Now, I could say a lot about that because it's not easy, but also trust, believe in you and in your experiences and feelings, and let go. John Kabat-Zinn says, letting go rather than getting bogged down by things you cannot change anyway. So let go everything, no, but focus only on those things that you can influence, that you can change. So wise men speak because they have something to say, and fools because they have to say something. So when it comes to speaking and listening, are you the fool or are you the wise man? I like to think the latter. And this is a quote by the Greek philosopher Plato. I'd welcome any questions there might be.
Thank you, Carolyn, so much for presenting on this topic. Some wonderful takeaways today. So yes, we'll move on to questions here. So if folks have any questions, please use the Q&A section, and I'll pass those on to Carolyn. So we do have one question here that might challenge your memory a bit here. What are some good resources for improving emotional intelligence, if you have any?
Good resources. Yes, well, Daniel Goleman has written a couple of really good books around emotional intelligence. I think the one from the Center for Creative Leadership, Fear Your Strengths, will increase your emotional intelligence. And I'll go to the resources page. The Institute for Mindful Leadership, and well, they have a lot of very valuable information. Let's see, the book by Ryan Holiday, it's not listed as an emotional intelligence book, but it's called Stillness is Key, or The Key is Stillness. If you search Stillness and Key book, Ryan Holiday, I think that really is a good resource for strengthening your emotional intelligence as well.
Great, thank you.
I hope this is helpful.
That is the only question we have. Looks like you're very informative today. So if we could move on to the last slide, please.
Yes, yes.
Wonderful. I mentioned earlier, we will send a link to the webinar recording within a week of the webinar. If you enjoyed this webinar and want to dive deeper into this topic, there's a list of upcoming courses and webinars on this slide, as well as the college's contact information if you'd like to learn more information. Otherwise, thank you for joining us today, and you all have a wonderful and safe afternoon.